The gunshot that killed Winifred Norton's first love echoed in her dreams every night for 3 years. And when she stepped off the stagecoach in Gold Hill, Nevada in the spring of 1877, she carried that sound with her like a weight around her heart. Dust swirled around her worn boots as she surveyed the bustling mining town, her leather satchel clutched tightly in one hand. The April sun beat down mercilessly on the high desert landscape, turning the streets into rivers of powder that coated everything in sight. Gold Hill had seen better days since the Comstock-Lode's glory years, but it still hummed with enough activity to make a living if you were willing to work hard. Winifred was more than willing. At 23 years old, she had learned that hard work was the only thing you could truly count on in this world. She had come west from Missouri with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a reference letter for a position as a schoolteacher. The town's previous teacher had married a mine foreman and moved to San Francisco, leaving Gold Hill's children without instruction. Winifred needed the job desperately, and more importantly, she needed the distance from the memories that haunted her in Kansas City. Thomas had been his name. Thomas Whitmore, with his easy smile and promises of forever. They had been engaged for 6 months when she discovered the truth about him. He had another woman in St. Louis, a wife actually, and when that wife's brothers came looking for him, they found him in a saloon. The confrontation had been brief and brutal. Winifred had been waiting for Thomas at the restaurant where they were supposed to have dinner when she heard the shot. By the time she pushed through the crowd, he was already dead, his lies dying with him. But it was not just his death that haunted her. It was the betrayal, the realization that everything he had told her was false, that she had given her heart to a man who had never deserved it. She had trusted him completely, believed in him with every fiber of her being, and he had used that trust to deceive her. Since that day, Winifred had built walls around her heart so high and thick that nobody could scale them. She preferred it that way. The boarding house stood at the end of Main Street, a 2-story wooden structure that leaned slightly to the left. Mrs. Garrett, the proprietress, was a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. She showed Winifred to a small room on the 2nd floor with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the street. "Meals are included with the rent, dear Mrs. Garrett said, smoothing her apron. "Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 6. You will start teaching on Monday. The schoolhouse is just down the street, past the general store. Mr. Henderson, he is on the school board, will meet you there at 8 o'clock sharp." Winifred thanked her and closed the door, sinking onto the bed with exhaustion. The journey from Kansas City had taken 2 weeks, and every muscle in her body ached. She allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to rest before she stood, unpacked her few belongings, and washed the travel dust from her face and hands. She had learned not to dwell on tiredness or discomfort. Forward motion was the only cure for a troubled mind. That evening she took supper in the boarding house dining room with the other residents. There were 6 of them in total. A bank clerk named Robert, 2 miners who spoke mostly to each other, a widow named Mrs. Patterson who worked as a seamstress, and a traveling salesman passing through on his way to Virginia City. They were polite but curious, asking questions about where she had come from and why she had chosen Gold Hill. Winifred answered briefly, offering no more information than necessary. She had become expert at deflecting personal inquiries. The next morning, Saturday, she walked through town to familiarize herself with her new home. Gold Hill sprawled across the hillside in a haphazard collection of buildings, some permanent and some clearly temporary. The main street boasted a general store, a bank, 2 saloons, a hotel, a blacksmith shop, and various other establishments. Men far outnumbered women, as was typical in mining towns, and Winifred felt their eyes on her as she passed. She kept her gaze forward and her spine straight, radiating an aura that discouraged conversation. The schoolhouse was a simple frame building with 6 windows and a small bell tower. Winifred tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside, rows of desks sat arranged before a blackboard, and a large desk occupied the front corner. Textbooks lined a shelf on the wall, their spines cracked and faded. It was modest, but it was hers, and she felt a small flutter of satisfaction. This was exactly what she needed: a purpose, a place, a life built on her own terms without depending on anyone else. She was examining the textbooks when she heard the door creak open behind her. She turned to find a man standing in the doorway, hat in hand. He was tall, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and his eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, like sagebrush after rain. He looked to be about 30 years old, give or take a year or two. "Pardon me, madam," he said, his voice low and measured. "Did not mean to startle you. I am Harrison Garrett. My mother owns the boarding house where you are staying. She mentioned you might be here." Winifred studied him carefully. She recognized the last name, of course, but Mrs. Garrett had not mentioned having a son. He wore dusty work clothes and scuffed boots, and his hands were calloused from hard labor. A cowboy or ranch hand, she guessed, though cattle ranching was not the primary industry in these parts. "Mr. Garrett," she said with a polite nod, maintaining her distance. "I am Miss Norton, the new teacher." "Yes, madam, I know. Welcome to Gold Hill." He shifted his weight, seemingly uncomfortable. "I wanted to bring you these." He held up a stack of books she had not noticed before. "These belonged to Miss Cooper, the previous teacher. She left them behind when she moved, thought you might have use for them." He crossed the room and set the books gently on her desk. They were primers and a collection of poetry, worn but serviceable. It was a thoughtful gesture, one Winifred had not expected. "Thank you," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "That is kind of you. It is no trouble." He put his hat back on and touched the brim in a small salute. "If you need anything else, madam, you can leave word with my mother. I come by most evenings for supper." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Winifred stared at the books he had brought, unsettled by the unexpected kindness. She had grown so accustomed to people wanting something from her, or worse, lying to her, that a simple gesture of goodwill felt suspicious. She pushed the thought aside and returned her attention to organizing the classroom. Over the weekend, she threw herself into preparation. She scrubbed the desks, washed the windows, organized the books, and planned her first lessons. Physical work helped quiet her mind, and by Sunday evening, the schoolhouse was spotless and ready. She attended church services that morning out of obligation rather than faith. The small church was packed with families, and she noted the children who would likely be her students. They ranged in age from about 6 to 15, a mixed group that would require careful management. Harrison Garrett sat in the back pew with his mother. Winifred noticed him only because she made a point of cataloging everyone in the room, a habit born of caution. He did not seek her out after the service, for which she was grateful. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. Winifred rang the school bell at precisely 8 o'clock, and children began filing in. There were 18 in total, including several who looked skeptical about having a young woman as their teacher. She stood before them with her shoulders back and her expression firm. "Good morning," she said. "I am Miss Norton, and I will be your teacher. We will begin each day at 8 o'clock sharp. If you are late, you will stay after school to make up the time. I expect respect, attention, and your best effort." In return, I will teach you everything I know and treat you fairly. Does everyone understand? A chorus of yes, madam, answered her. One boy in the back, perhaps 14 years old and big for his age, crossed his arms and glared. She made a mental note to watch him carefully. The first day passed without major incident. She assessed their reading and arithmetic levels, assigned seats, and established rules. By the time she dismissed them at 3 o'clock, she was exhausted but satisfied. Teaching was hard work, but it was honest work, and it gave her a sense of purpose she had been missing. As the students filed out, the large boy from the back row approached her desk. Up close, she could see he was older than she had initially thought, probably 15 or 16. His jaw was set in a stubborn line. "My pa says girls should not be teaching," he announced. "Says you will probably get married and run off just like Miss Cooper did." Winifred met his gaze steadily. "Your father is entitled to his opinion, Mr. Williams. Jake Williams, Mr. Williams. However, I have no intention of marrying or running off anywhere. I am here to teach, and I suggest you focus on your studies rather than speculation about my personal life. You are behind in both mathematics and grammar, and we have a great deal of work to do." His face reddened, but he nodded and left. Winifred sat at her desk and allowed herself a moment to breathe. This was going to be challenging, but she had faced worse. Over the next few weeks, she settled into a routine. She taught Monday through Friday, spent Saturdays preparing lessons and exploring the surrounding area, and Sundays at church followed by quiet reading. She kept to herself, polite but distant with the other boarding house residents and the townspeople she encountered. Mrs. Garrett fussed over her like a mother hen, always trying to get her to eat more at meals or take extra rest. Harrison Garrett continued to appear for supper several evenings a week. He worked at her ranch about 5 miles outside town. Winifred learned from his mother's casual conversation, managing horses and cattle for a man named Mr. Reynolds. He was quiet during meals, listening more than talking, but she sometimes felt his eyes on her. She ignored it. One evening in early May, a commotion in the street drew several boarders to the windows. 2 men were arguing outside the saloon, their voices raised and angry. Winifred stayed seated at the table, her stomach tight with familiar anxiety. Loud male voices, anger, the potential for violence, it all transported her back to that night in Kansas City. "Just a disagreement over cards," Mrs. Garrett said, returning to her seat. "Nothing to worry about. The sheriff will sort it out." But Winifred's hands shook as she lifted her teacup. She excused herself early and retreated to her room, where she sat on her bed and breathed slowly until the panic subsided. She hated how easily fear could overtake her, how a simple argument could unravel her composure. Thomas had done this to her, she thought bitterly. He had taken her ability to trust, her sense of safety, and shattered both beyond repair. The next afternoon, after dismissing her students, she found a package on her desk. It was wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. She opened it cautiously to find a book of poems by Emily Dickinson, a newer edition than the worn volumes on her shelf. A note in careful handwriting read, "Thought you might enjoy these. H. Garrett." Winifred stared at the book, uncertain how to feel. It was another kindness, another gesture she had not asked for or expected. Part of her wanted to return it, to maintain the walls she had built so carefully. But another part, a smaller and more frightened part, whispered that perhaps not all kindness came with strings attached. She kept the book. Over the following weeks, Harrison continued his quiet acts of thoughtfulness. He repaired a broken hinge on the schoolhouse door without being asked. He brought her a jar of honey from a local beekeeper, mentioning casually that his mother had said Winifred had a cough. He never lingered, never asked for anything in return, never pushed for conversation beyond basic pleasantries. It unsettled her more than outright attention would have. She did not know what to do with someone who gave without expecting to take. In mid-May, Jake Williams stopped coming to school. When Winifred inquired, one of the other students mentioned that Jake's father had pulled him out to work in the mines. It was not uncommon. Families needed the income, but it frustrated her. Jake had been making progress despite his initial resistance. That evening she mentioned it to Mrs. Garrett during supper. "It is such a waste," she said. "The boy has potential if he would apply himself." Harrison, who had been eating quietly, looked up. "Tom Williams drinks most of what he earns," he said. "The family struggles. His wife takes in laundry to make ends meet. Jake probably had no choice." "That does not make it right," Winifred said, more sharply than she intended. "No, madam, it does not." Harrison's voice was gentle. "But sometimes people do not have the luxury of what is right, only what is necessary." She wanted to argue, but she could not. She knew about necessity, about making hard choices. She finished her meal in silence. 2 days later, Jake Williams returned to school. He slipped into his seat without explanation, but Winifred noticed the relief on his face when she simply nodded and continued the lesson. After class, she asked him to stay behind. "I am glad you are back, Mr. Williams," she said. He shuffled his feet. "Yes, madam. Someone paid my pa what I would have earned in the mines for the next month, said I should finish my schooling. Pa agreed since the money was the same." Winifred's heart skipped. "Did you learn who it was?" "No, madam." "Pa just said it was someone who thought education was important." He looked at her earnestly. "I promise I will work hard, Miss Norton. I will make it worth it." "I know you will, Jake." After he left, she stood in the empty schoolroom and felt tears prick her eyes. She knew exactly who had paid that money. Harrison Garrett had earned a month's wages and spent it on a boy he barely knew, asking for no recognition or thanks. The gesture was so pure, so selfless, that it cracked something inside her chest. That evening she waited until Harrison arrived for supper. As soon as Mrs. Garrett served the meal and bustled back to the kitchen, Winifred spoke. "I know what you did for Jake Williams." Harrison looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "I do not know what you mean, Miss Norton." "Yes, you do." She kept her voice low so the other boarders would not overhear. "You paid his father so he could continue school. If someone did that, they probably wanted it kept quiet. Why?" The question came out more intense than she intended. "Why would you do that?" He set down his fork and met her eyes. "Because education matters. Because that boy deserves a chance. Because his teacher cares enough about him to be upset when he left, and that kind of caring should be supported." He paused. "And because I could." The simplicity of his answer left her speechless. He returned to his meal as if the conversation had never happened, and Winifred sat struggling with emotions she had not allowed herself to feel in years. After supper, she followed him onto the boarding house porch. The evening air was cooling and stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "Mr. Garrett," she said, "I do not understand you." He turned, his face shadowed in the dim light. "Nothing to understand, madam. I am just a cowboy who tries to do right when he can." "Nobody is just anything." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. Not everyone, Miss Norton." His voice was soft. "I am sorry that someone taught you otherwise." The words hit too close to home. "You do not know anything about me." "I know you are afraid," he said quietly. "I know something hurt you badly enough that you keep everyone at arm's length. I know you work yourself to exhaustion trying not to think about whatever it was." He took a step closer, though still maintaining respectful distance. "And I know you deserve kindness anyway, regardless of whether you trust it or not." Winifred felt her throat tighten. "I cannot," she whispered. "I cannot trust like that again." "I am not asking you to trust me, Miss Norton. I am just trying to be decent. No expectations, no demands. Just one human being treating another with respect." He touched his hat brim. "Good night, madam." He walked away, leaving her standing on the porch with her heart hammering and tears sliding down her cheeks. She wiped them away angrily. She did not want to cry, did not want to feel anything. But Harrison Garrett was slowly, persistently dismantling her defenses, and she did not know how to stop him. As May turned to June, the weather grew hotter. The students grew restless with the approaching end of the school year, and Winifred had to work harder to maintain order. Jake Williams proved true to his word, applying himself diligently to his studies. Several of the younger children had made remarkable progress in reading, and Winifred felt a surge of pride in their achievements. Harrison continued his quiet presence in her life. He never pushed, never demanded her time or attention, but he was there. When a rattlesnake appeared near the schoolhouse, he came and removed it safely. When the school's water pump broke, he fixed it. When she mentioned to his mother that she missed the lilacs that had grown outside her window in Kansas City, a jar of wildflowers appeared on her boarding house doorstep the next morning. Each act was small, insignificant on its own. But together, they formed a pattern of consistent, reliable kindness that Winifred had never experienced before. Thomas had been grand gestures and flowery promises, all flash with no substance. Harrison was the opposite, steady, dependable, asking nothing in return. It terrified her. One Saturday afternoon in late June, Winifred decided to take a walk beyond the town limits. She needed space to think, to breathe, to escape the confusing tangle of emotions Harrison had stirred up. She followed a trail that wound up into the hills, enjoying the solitude and the view of the valley below. She was so lost in thought that she did not notice the loose rocks beneath her feet until it was too late. Her boot slipped, her ankle twisted painfully, and she fell hard onto the rocky ground. Pain shot through her leg, and when she tried to stand, she nearly blacked out. Her ankle was either badly sprained or broken. She could not tell which, but she definitely could not walk on it. The trail was isolated, and she had told no one where she was going. Panic began to set in as she realized the seriousness of her situation. The sun was already past its peak, and temperatures would drop significantly once night fell. She tried calling for help, but her voice barely carried in the vast openness. She had been sitting there for perhaps an hour, trying to figure out what to do when she heard hoofbeats. A rider appeared on the trail below, and her heart leaped with relief and resignation when she recognized the horse and rider. Of course it would be Harrison Garrett. He dismounted quickly when he saw her. "Miss Norton, what happened?" "I fell, my ankle." She hated how small her voice sounded. "I cannot walk." He knelt beside her, his face serious. "May I examine it?" She nodded, and he carefully removed her boot and stocking. His hands were gentle as he probed the swollen joint. She winced but did not cry out. "I do not think it is broken," he said, "but it is badly sprained. You will need to stay off it for several days." He looked up at her. "I am going to have to get you back to town. With your permission, I will need to carry you to my horse." "How did you even know I was here?" "Mrs. Garrett mentioned you had gone for a walk hours ago and had not returned. She was starting to worry, so I went looking." He shrugged. "There are only so many directions you could have gone." He had come looking for her. He had noticed she was missing and cared enough to search. The realization made her chest ache. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you." He scooped her up as if she weighed nothing, and she had no choice but to put her arms around his neck. She could feel the solid warmth of him, smell the scent of leather and sage and honest sweat. He settled her onto his horse and mounted behind her, keeping one arm securely around her waist. The ride back to town was both eternal and too brief. Winifred was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, of the strength in the arm that held her steady, of the calm certainty with which he guided the horse. She had not been this close to a man since Thomas, and her instinct was to pull away to protect herself. But she was injured and dependent, and for once she had no choice but to accept help. "Why do you do this?" she asked suddenly. "Do what?" "Help people. Help me." "You must know I have given you no encouragement." She felt him shift slightly behind her. "Miss Norton, I do not help you because I expect encouragement. I help because it is the right thing to do." "But why me specifically? There are plenty of other people in this town." He was silent for a long moment. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes." "Because the first time I saw you, I saw someone carrying pain so heavy it was crushing her. Because your eyes look like you are always braced for the next blow. Because despite that, you show up every day and teach those children with everything you have. Because you are brave and strong and stubborn, and you deserve to know that not everyone in this world is going to hurt you." His words broke something inside her, some final barrier she had been desperately clinging to. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and unstoppable. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry. You have been nothing but kind, and I have been cold and suspicious. You have been protecting yourself. There is no shame in that." "There was a man," she heard herself say, "in Kansas City. We were engaged. I thought I knew him, thought I could trust him, but everything about him was a lie. He was already married. When the truth came out, her brothers killed him right in front of me." Harrison's arm tightened slightly around her. "I am sorry that happened to you. I loved him so much. I gave him everything, trusted him completely, and it was all false." She wiped at her tears with one hand. "I swore I would never let anyone that close again. I would rather be alone than be fooled like that again." "That makes sense," Harrison said gently. "But Miss Norton, living in fear is not really living. It is just surviving. Surviving is enough, is it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you are punishing yourself for someone else's sins." She had no answer to that. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and when they reached town, Harrison carried her into the boarding house. Mrs. Garrett fussed and clucked and immediately sent for the doctor, who confirmed Harrison's assessment. The ankle was badly sprained and needed rest and elevation. Winifred spent the next week confined to her room, frustrated and restless. School was out for the summer, which was fortunate, but she hated being idle. Mrs. Garrett brought her meals and magazines, and several of the students stopped by with drawings and well wishes. Jake Williams brought her a carved wooden bird he had made, his ears red with embarrassment as he presented it. Harrison came every evening. He never stayed long, just brought her things to read or small treats from the general store. He told her stories about the ranch and the horses he worked with, keeping her entertained without demanding anything from her. Slowly, inevitably, Winifred found herself looking forward to his visits, found herself smiling at his dry humor and gentle observations, found herself noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the scar on his left hand from a rope burn, the way he really listened when she talked. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after her injury, he arrived with a chessboard. "My mother mentioned you know how to play," he said. "Thought you might welcome the distraction." They set up the board on a small table by her bedside, and Harrison pulled up a chair. They played in comfortable silence, and Winifred was surprised to find he was a skilled player. She won the first game, but just barely. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked as they reset the pieces. "My father taught me. He was educated back east before he came west to seek his fortune." Harrison's expression grew distant. "He did not find gold, but he found my mother. That was worth more, he always said. What happened to him? Cave-in at the Consolidated Mine, 8 years ago. He was working as a surveyor. I am sorry. Harrison nodded. He was a good man, taught me that character matters more than wealth and that how you treat people defines who you are. He moved his knight. I try to live by that. They played another game, and this time Harrison won. As he was packing up the board, Winifred caught his hand. Harrison, she said, using his first name for the first time. Thank you for everything, for being patient with me. His gray-green eyes met hers, warm and steady. You are worth the patience, Winifred. Her name sounded different in his voice, like something precious. Her heart hammered in her chest, and for the first time in 3 years she felt something besides fear. She felt hope. By early July, Winifred's ankle had healed enough for her to walk with only a slight limp. She resumed her normal activities, grateful to escape the confines of her room. The town was preparing for Independence Day celebrations, and there was an energy in the air that was almost infectious. Harrison asked if she would accompany him to the festivities. As friends, he added quickly. No pressure, no expectations. Just thought you might enjoy the company. Winifred hesitated. This felt like a line she would be crossing, an acknowledgement of something shifting between them. But she thought about what he had said on the ride back from the hills, about surviving versus living. She thought about all the small kindnesses he had shown her, never wavering even when she pushed him away. She thought about how her heart felt lighter when he was near. I would like that, she said. His smile was like sunrise. The 4th of July celebration was held in the town square. There were games and competitions, food vendors, and a makeshift stage for speeches and music. Children ran everywhere, sticky with candy and drunk on excitement. Winifred wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and Harrison appeared in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. They wandered through the festivities together, talking and laughing. Harrison won her a ribbon at the shooting competition, and she surprised them both by winning the pie-eating contest after being goaded into it by Mrs. Garrett. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, a small band began to play, and couples moved to dance in the square. Harrison offered his hand. May I? Winifred looked at that outstretched hand and felt terror and longing war inside her. Dancing meant closeness, meant vulnerability, meant admitting that she cared. But she had been running from caring for so long, and she was tired of running. She placed her hand in his. Yes. He led her into the dancing area and pulled her gently into his arms. They moved together to the music, and Winifred was aware of every point of contact. His hand at her waist, her hand on his shoulder, their joined hands between them. She had danced with Thomas before, but that had been different. This felt real in a way nothing had felt in years. You are trembling, Harrison said softly. I am afraid, she admitted, of me, of this, of caring again, of being hurt again. He squeezed her hand gently. I cannot promise you will never be hurt. Life does not work that way. But I can promise I will never lie to you, never deceive you, never be anything other than exactly who I am. And who I am is a man who has come to care for you deeply. Winifred looked up into his face, at the honesty written there, and felt something inside her break free. I care for you too, she whispered. That terrifies me. We will take it slow, he said. As slow as you need. I am not going anywhere. The music swelled around them, and Winifred leaned her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. She was still afraid, but the fear no longer felt insurmountable. Over the following weeks, Winifred and Harrison spent increasing amounts of time together. They took walks in the evening, played chess, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Harrison told her about his dreams of owning his own ranch someday, about the horses he trained and loved. Winifred shared her love of literature, her hopes for her students, her memories of growing up with 3 brothers who had taught her to be tough. She told him more about Thomas, about the devastation of discovering his betrayal, about the guilt she still carried for not seeing through his lies. Harrison listened without judgment, holding her hand as she cried for the girl she had been, the innocent trust she had lost. "You are not foolish for trusting him," he said firmly. "He was despicable for abusing that trust. The fault was his, not yours." Those words, spoken with such conviction, helped heal something in Winifred that had been festering for years. She began to forgive herself, to understand that being deceived did not make her weak or stupid. It just meant she had encountered someone without honor. Harrison was different. Everything about him was different. He was consistent, reliable, transparent. When he said he would do something, he did it. When he made a promise, he kept it. He never pressured her for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel guilty for her caution. He simply showed up, day after day, proving through his actions that he was worthy of trust. In August, Winifred reopened the school and her days became busy with teaching. Harrison continued to work at the Reynolds Ranch, but he made time to see her several evenings a week. The townspeople had noticed their courtship, for that was what it had become, and Mrs. Garrett was beside herself with delight. "I always knew you two would be perfect together," she told Winifred over breakfast one morning. "From the moment Harrison first mentioned seeing you, I could hear something different in his voice." "He mentioned me?" Winifred asked, surprised. "Of course, dear. He came home from bringing you those books and told me he had met the new teacher, said you looked like you were carrying the weight of the world and he wished he knew how to help." Mrs. Garrett patted her hand. "My boy has a good heart. His father would be proud." That evening, Winifred told Harrison what his mother had said. They were sitting on the porch of the boarding house, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of orange and gold. "She is right," Harrison admitted. "I noticed you immediately. You stood out in that schoolhouse, so determined and so sad all at once. I wanted to know you." "Did you know I would fight you every step of the way?" Winifred asked with a small smile. "I suspected." He grinned. "But I am stubborn too, comes with working with horses. You cannot force them to trust you. You have to earn it, bit by bit, until they understand you will not hurt them." "Are you comparing me to a horse?" "Only in the most flattering way." He laughed at her expression. "I am saying you were right to be cautious, and I understood that. Trust is earned, not demanded." Winifred leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "You have earned it," she said quietly. "I trust you, Harrison. That is both wonderful and terrifying." He kissed the top of her head, a tender gesture he had not attempted before. "I will honor that trust, Winifred, every day, for as long as you will let me." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one, and Winifred felt a peace she had not known in years. She was not healed completely, might never be completely, but she was healing. Harrison had shown her that not all men were liars, not all love was false, not all risks led to devastation. In September, Harrison took her to meet Mr. Reynolds and see the ranch where he worked. It was a beautiful spread of land with rolling pastures and a sturdy house. Harrison introduced her to the horses with obvious pride, explaining each one's personality and quirks. Winifred could see how much he loved the work, how natural he was with the animals. "This is what you should be doing," she said as they watched the horses graze. "Not working for someone else, but building something of your own." "Someday," Harrison said. "I have been saving my wages for years. It is slow going, but I have almost enough for a down payment on some land." "Where?" she asked, her heart skipping. If he moved away to start his own ranch, what would happen between them? "There is a property about 3 miles from here, good water and grazing land. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price." He looked at her seriously. "I would not go far, Winifred. My life is here now. You are here." The implication of his words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. They had been courting for months now, growing closer with each passing day, but neither had spoken explicitly about the future. Winifred knew what she wanted, could finally admit it to herself, but the words still stuck in her throat. "I love you," Harrison said simply. "I have for months. I know that might be too much too soon, and you do not have to say anything back, but I needed you to know." Winifred turned to face him fully, her heart hammering. "I love you too," she said, and saying it felt like jumping off a cliff and finding wings. "I did not think I could ever feel this way again, but you showed me I was wrong. You have been patient and kind and honest, and you have made me believe in love again." Harrison cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she breathed. He kissed her gently, reverently, as if she were something precious and fragile. Winifred kissed him back, pouring 3 years of fear and loneliness and hope into that connection. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. "Marry me," Harrison said. "Not now, not until you are ready, but someday. Marry me and build a life with me." Winifred felt tears on her cheeks, but for once they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They set a date for the following spring, giving themselves time to prepare and save money. Harrison continued working at the Reynolds Ranch while pursuing the purchase of his own land. Winifred continued teaching, pouring her energy into her students while planning for her future. They saw each other as often as possible, their relationship deepening with each conversation, each shared moment, each challenge they faced together. In October, Jake Williams came to class with bruises on his face. Winifred kept him after school and gently asked what had happened. After much reluctance, he admitted his father had been drinking and had struck him. Winifred's heart broke for the boy. She knew she could not solve all his problems, but she also knew she could not ignore them. She discussed the situation with Harrison that evening. "I do not know what to do," she said. "I want to help him, but I have no authority to intervene." "Let me talk to Tom Williams," Harrison said. "Man to man. Sometimes that works better than official channels." 2 days later, Jake came to school with no new bruises and a small smile. After class, he told Winifred that Mr. Garrett had offered him a job helping at the ranch on weekends, and his father had agreed to let him take it. "Mr. Garrett said keeping busy and earning my own money might help things at home," Jake explained. "And Pa said he was glad I would be out from underfoot." It was not a perfect solution, but it gave Jake an escape and a purpose. Once again, Harrison had seen a need and quietly filled it, expecting no recognition or praise. Winifred's love for him grew even deeper. Winter came to Gold Hill with snow and bitter cold. Winifred kept the schoolhouse warm with a large stove, and Harrison made sure it was always stocked with firewood. On Christmas Eve, they attended church services together, and afterward, Harrison presented her with a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring set with a small sapphire. "It was my grandmother's," Harrison said. "My father gave it to my mother when he proposed, and she wanted you to have it." Winifred slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly. "It is beautiful. It is a promise," Harrison said, "that I will love you and stand by you always." She kissed him under the winter stars, and her heart felt full to bursting. The school year continued through winter and into early spring. Winifred's students thrived under her instruction, even the most challenging ones. Jake Williams, in particular, had blossomed with the combination of school and ranch work. He was reading at an advanced level now, and had developed a passion for learning that brought Winifred immense satisfaction. In March, Harrison completed the purchase of his land. He began building a house immediately, working every spare moment with the help of friends and neighbors. Winifred visited the site regularly, watching with wonder as their future home took shape. It was not large, just 4 rooms to start, but it was solid and well built, with windows that faced east to catch the morning sun. Their wedding was planned for the first Saturday in May, a year after Winifred had first arrived in Gold Hill. Mrs. Garrett was coordinating everything with enthusiastic efficiency, and half the town seemed invested in the celebration. But as the date approached, Winifred found herself plagued by nightmares. In her dreams, she was back in Kansas City, watching Thomas die, discovering his betrayal. She would wake in a cold sweat, her heart racing, terrified that something would go wrong, that Harrison would turn out to be someone other than who he claimed, that she was making a terrible mistake. 1 week before the wedding, she broke down completely. She was supposed to meet Harrison for dinner, but instead she sent word that she was unwell. She spent the evening pacing her room, panic consuming her. What if she was wrong about him? What if she was being fooled again? What if she married him and then discovered he had secrets, lies, another life? There was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Harrison standing there, concern written across his face. "My mother said you were ill," he said, "but I think you are scared." Winifred nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "May I come in?" She stepped aside and he entered, closing the door behind him. He did not try to touch her, just stood there waiting. "I am terrified," she finally said. "What if I am making a mistake? What if you are not who I think you are, Winifred?" His voice was gentle. "You have known me for a year. In that time, have I ever lied to you, even about small things? Have I ever hidden anything from you? Have I ever given you any reason to doubt me?" She shook her head. "No, but Thomas did not either, not until it was too late. I am not Thomas." Harrison took a step closer. "I know your fear is real. I know it is not rational, and I am not asking you to pretend it is not there. But I am asking you to look at the evidence. Look at my actions, not just my words. Have I been consistent? Have I been trustworthy?" Winifred thought about the past year, about every promise Harrison had made and kept, about the way he had never once pressured her, never once made her feel unsafe, never once given her cause to question his integrity. About the countless small kindnesses, the patience, the steady presence. "Yes," she whispered, "you have been everything you promised to be. Then trust that, trust what you know, not what you fear." He held out his hand. "I love you, Winifred Norton. I want to marry you and spend my life proving every single day that you made the right choice. But if you are not ready, we can wait. We can postpone the wedding until you feel certain." "No." Winifred took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength, the warmth. "No, I do not want to wait. I want to marry you. I am just scared. Being scared is normal. You would be foolish not to be scared after what you have been through." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "But fear does not have to control you. Love can be stronger than fear if you let it be." She clung to him, breathing in his scent, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. "Will you be patient with me? Even after we are married, I might have moments like this again." "I will be patient with you for the rest of our lives," he promised. "Whatever you need, however long it takes. We are a team now, Winifred. Your struggles are my struggles. We will face them together." His words, his presence, his unwavering steadiness finally calmed the storm inside her. She realized she had been waiting for him to falter, to show his true colors, but his true colors were exactly what he had shown her all along. Integrity, kindness, reliability, love. "I am ready," she said. "I am ready to marry you and trust in us." The wedding took place as planned on a beautiful May morning. The church was packed with townspeople who had come to celebrate, and Winifred wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Garrett had helped her make. Harrison stood at the altar in a new suit, his eyes bright with emotion as she walked down the aisle. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, promises made before God and community. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her with such tender joy that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. The reception was held in the town square, with tables laden with food and music provided by the local band. Winifred danced with her new husband, with Jake Williams, who had become like a younger brother to her, with Mr. Reynolds, who had given Harrison the day off with his blessing, with Robert from the boarding house, and several of her older male students. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Harrison led her to a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers. They rode out to their new home, their ranch, their future. The house glowed with lamplight, and someone, probably Mrs. Garrett, had stocked the kitchen and made up the bed with fresh linens. That night, for the first time, Winifred gave herself fully to another person without fear. Harrison was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Winifred felt a completeness she had never known. "I am glad I trusted you," she whispered. "I am glad you gave me the chance," Harrison replied, kissing her forehead. "I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Their first year of marriage was an adjustment, as all first years are. They learned each other's habits and quirks, negotiated chores and responsibilities, built routines that worked for both of them. Winifred continued teaching during the school year, riding the 3 miles to town each day while Harrison worked on establishing the ranch. They acquired cattle and more horses, planting gardens and building corrals. Jake Williams came to work for them every weekend and during school breaks. He had become part of their lives, and Harrison taught him everything about ranching and horses. It filled a need in all of them. Jake for a positive male role model, Harrison for someone to mentor, and Winifred for the satisfaction of seeing a young person thrive under good guidance. There were difficult moments. Times when Winifred's old fears would resurface, when she would wake from nightmares about Thomas and need Harrison's reassurance. Times when money was tight and they had to make hard decisions about the ranch. Times when they argued about small things blown out of proportion by stress and exhaustion, but they worked through everything together. Harrison never dismissed her fears or told her to just get over them. Instead, he held her, listened to her, reminded her of the reality they had built together. And Winifred learned to voice her needs and concerns instead of bottling them up, learned that vulnerability was not weakness but strength. In their second year of marriage, Winifred discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. What if she was not a good mother? What if something went wrong? Harrison calmed her fears with his steady presence, and Mrs. Garrett fussed and prepared, knitting blankets and baby clothes with enthusiasm. Their son was born in February of 1880, a cold winter morning when the world was blanketed in snow. The labor was long and difficult, but when Harrison placed the squalling infant in her arms, Winifred felt a love so fierce and immediate that it took her breath away. "What should we name him?" Harrison asked, his eyes wet with tears. Winifred looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect. "James," she said. "James Robert Garrett." "After your father and brother," Harrison said with approval. "He would be honored." Baby James was a good-natured child who rarely fussed and slept well. Winifred took the spring semester off from teaching to care for him, though she planned to return in the fall. Mrs. Garrett was delighted to watch her grandson during school hours, and the arrangement worked well for everyone. Jake Williams, now 17, had become an integral part of the ranch operation. He was skilled with horses and had a natural gift for training them. Harrison was teaching him the business side of ranching as well, and they had talked about Jake becoming a full partner when he came of age. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Winifred returned to teaching in the fall, bringing James with her until he was old enough for Mrs. Garrett to watch. The school board was initially skeptical about a married woman continuing to teach, but Winifred's students performed so well that they could not justify replacing her. When James was 2 years old, Winifred became pregnant again. This time she was less anxious, more confident in her body's ability to bring forth life. Their daughter was born in late 1882, an October baby with her father's gray-green eyes and her mother's dark hair. Elizabeth, Winifred said, naming her after Harrison's mother who had been such a constant source of support and love. Elizabeth Ann Garrett. They called her Lizzie, and she was a spitfire from the start, demanding and energetic where James had been placid. She kept them all on their toes, but she also filled the house with laughter and life. As the children grew, the ranch grew with them. Harrison and Jake, who was now a full partner as planned, acquired more land and expanded their cattle operation. They gained a reputation for high-quality horses, and buyers came from as far as Carson City and Sacramento. Winifred continued teaching, beloved by her students and respected by the community. Jake married at 21, a sweet girl named Sarah who worked at the general store. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property, and Jake's presence as both partner and neighbor was a blessing. His father, Tom, had died from drink a few years earlier, but his mother, finally free from that burden, had remarried and moved to Virginia City. Jake was at peace with it, having built his own family and life. Mrs. Garrett passed away peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1886. Her death hit Harrison hard, but he took comfort in knowing she had lived to see him happy and settled, to know her grandchildren, to watch the ranch thrive. They buried her next to his father in the town cemetery, and Winifred held Harrison as he grieved, grateful she could give him the support he had so often given her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, in May of 1888, Harrison surprised Winifred with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had left Nevada in years, and they spent 3 glorious days exploring the city, attending theater performances, eating in restaurants, and staying in a real hotel. It was a second honeymoon, a celebration of all they had built and survived together. "Are you happy?" Harrison asked her one evening as they watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Winifred replied honestly. "There were times when I thought I would never trust anyone again, never open my heart again, but you showed me I was wrong. You earned my trust one kind act at a time, and now I cannot imagine life without you." "I fell in love with you the first time I saw you," Harrison admitted. "Knew you were the one, even when you wanted nothing to do with me. I am a patient man, and you were worth waiting for." "We have built something beautiful," Winifred said, leaning into his embrace. "A family, a home, a life. I am grateful every day." They returned to Gold Hill refreshed and reconnected. James, now 8, and Lizzie, now 5, were thrilled to have their parents home and demanded stories about every detail of the trip. Life resumed its familiar rhythms, teaching and ranching, children and neighbors, challenges and triumphs. In 1890, Winifred discovered she was pregnant again at 36 years old. It was unexpected, as she had assumed her childbearing years were behind her, but she and Harrison welcomed the news with joy. This time the pregnancy was harder on her body, and Harrison worried constantly. But in March of 1891, she delivered a healthy baby boy they named Henry Thomas Garrett. "Thomas?" Harrison questioned gently. After him. No, Winifred said firmly. After the lesson he taught me, that trusting the wrong person can break you, but trusting the right person can heal you. His name is a reminder that pain can lead to growth, that mistakes can teach wisdom. I am not ashamed of my past anymore, Harrison. It led me to you. Harrison kissed her forehead. You are the strongest person I know. Little Henry was their surprise blessing, adored by his older siblings who doted on him constantly. James, now 11, took his role as big brother seriously, while Lizzie, 8 years old and bossy, insisted on helping with everything from feeding to diaper changes. The ranch continued to thrive. They had become one of the most successful operations in the region, known for quality livestock and fair dealing. Harrison and Jake had expanded into horse breeding specifically, developing a line that combined stamina with good temperament. Ranchers throughout Nevada and California sought their horses. In 1895, when James was 15, he announced he wanted to go to college. He had excelled in his studies under his mother's instruction, and he dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Harrison and Winifred discussed it at length. College was expensive, and they would miss him terribly, but they wanted him to have every opportunity. They sent him to the University of California in Berkeley that fall. It was hard watching him leave, but they were proud of his ambition and intelligence. He came home for summers and worked on the ranch, combining his academic knowledge with practical experience. Lizzie, meanwhile, announced she wanted to be a teacher like her mother. At 13, she was already helping with the younger students at school, and her passion for education was evident. Winifred worked with her extensively, preparing her for the path ahead. In 1898, on the eve of their 20th wedding anniversary, Harrison and Winifred sat on their porch watching the sunset. Henry, now 7, was playing in the yard with Jake's 2 sons. Lizzie was inside preparing dinner, having grown into a capable young woman of 16. James was away at university, thriving in his studies. 20 years, Harrison said wonderingly. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. You remember how scared I was? Winifred asked. How I pushed you away over and over. I remember thinking you were worth fighting for, worth being patient for. He took her hand. I would do it all again, every frustrating moment, because it led to this. You changed my life, Winifred said. You showed me that trust was possible, that love did not have to mean pain. You earned my trust one kind act at a time, never demanding, never forcing, just being consistently good and honorable. And you taught me that some things are worth waiting for. That patience and persistence can overcome even the deepest wounds. Harrison pulled her close. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than today. They sat together as the stars emerged, 2 people who had found each other against the odds and built a life full of love, trust, and commitment. The journey had not always been easy, but it had been worth every challenge. James graduated from university in 1899 and returned to Gold Hill to set up a veterinary practice. He was the first veterinarian in the region, and his services were in high demand. He met and married a schoolteacher from Virginia City, a young woman named Grace, and they built a house in town. Lizzie finished her own education and began teaching alongside her mother. At 18, she had her mother's passion and her father's steady patience. She eventually took over when Winifred decided to retire from teaching at 50 years old, ready to focus entirely on the ranch and her grandchildren. Henry, the surprise baby, grew into a lanky teenager with a gift for music. He learned to play the fiddle and became a fixture at town dances and celebrations. He talked about traveling to see the world, and Winifred and Harrison encouraged him, knowing he needed to find his own path. Jake remained their partner and friend, his own family growing and thriving. The ranch that had started as Harrison's dream had become a legacy, something that would continue for generations. They employed several hands now, and the operation was substantial enough to support multiple families. In 1905, Harrison and Winifred celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. James and Grace came with their 2 daughters. Lizzie, now married to a schoolteacher from Carson City, brought her infant son. Henry, 24 years old, was there with his fiancée, a singer he had met in San Francisco. As Winifred looked around at the gathering, at the family she and Harrison had created, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the broken young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Gold Hill 28 years earlier, so damaged and afraid. She thought about Harrison's quiet persistence, his unwavering kindness, his refusal to give up on her even when she had given up on herself. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "How far we have come," she said. "How blessed we are. We built this together," he reminded her. "Every bit of it." She looked up at him, at the gray now threading his dark hair, at the lines time had etched around his eyes, at the face she loved more with each passing year. "You saved me," she said softly. "When I was drowning in fear and mistrust, you threw me a lifeline. You taught me that love could be safe, that trust could be earned, that my heart could heal." "You saved yourself," Harrison corrected gently. "I just showed you it was possible. You did the hard work of healing, of choosing to trust again despite the risk. I am proud of you, Winifred. Every single day, I am proud to be your husband." They danced that night under the stars, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating 3 decades of marriage and a lifetime of love. The fiddle played, children laughed, and Winifred felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The years continued to roll forward. Harrison and Winifred aged gracefully, their love deepening with time. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated milestones, weathered losses. Jake passed away in 1910, and they mourned the man who had been like family. Henry moved to San Francisco to pursue music but visited regularly. James's veterinary practice thrived, and Lizzie became the school principal. In 1919, Harrison and Winifred celebrated their 40th anniversary. Harrison was 66 now, and Winifred 65. They had retired from active ranch management, leaving the operation to James and Henry, who had returned home to take over the business. They spent their days in comfortable routine, morning coffee on the porch, walks around the property, evenings with books and conversation. 40 years, Winifred marveled. "More than half my life with you." "The best years," Harrison said. "Would not trade a single one. Not even the early years when I was so difficult, especially those years. They taught me patience and determination. They taught me that the best things in life require effort and commitment." He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that plagued him. "You were worth every moment of uncertainty, every rebuff, every small victory. You are still worth it." Winifred thought about the scared woman she had been, the man who had refused to give up on her, the life they had built through trust and persistence and love. She thought about the family surrounding them, the legacy they would leave behind. "I never thanked you properly," she said. "For seeing past my walls, for being patient, for earning my trust when I thought I could never trust again. You thank me every day by being here, by loving me, by building this life with me." Harrison pulled her close. "We were meant to find each other, Winifred. All the pain and fear and struggle, it led us to exactly where we needed to be." As the sun set over the Nevada hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Harrison and Winifred Garrett sat together in the peaceful twilight of their lives. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. They had raised children and built a legacy. But most importantly, they had proved that trust could be rebuilt, that hearts could heal, and that love, when given patiently and earned honestly, could overcome even the deepest wounds. Their story was not one of instant attraction or easy romance. It was a story of persistence and patience, of small kindnesses building into profound love, of trust earned one act at a time. It was proof that the past did not have to define the future, that fear could be conquered, and that taking a chance on love, even after devastating betrayal, could lead to a lifetime of happiness. As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one, Harrison and Winifred remained on their porch, hand in hand, heart to heart, surrounded by the life they had built and the love that had sustained them for 40 years. And in that moment, Winifred knew with absolute certainty that trusting Harrison Garrett had been the best decision she had ever made.